In the heart of medieval England, where deep forests stretched wide and villages clung to the edges of noble estates, there grew a legend that would never die. It was whispered first in taverns and sung by wandering minstrels, then passed from mouth to mouth along the roads and market squares. It was the tale of Robin Hood, the outlaw who dwelt beneath the green canopy of Sherwood and Barnesdale. A man who defied sheriffs, humbled bishops, and gave to the poor what he took from the rich. To the common folk who lived under heavy taxes and the stern hand of feudal lords, he was no common thief, but a champion. His bow struck down injustice, his hand lifted the downtrodden, and his laughter echoed like a promise that tyranny could be mocked and overcome. In him, people saw a hero who lived free of the walls of manor and castle, a man bound by no law but his own sense of honor. The world that gave birth to Robin's story was one of harsh contrasts. Abbots grew fat from rents and tithes, sheriffs hunted men for sport as much as for law, while peasants bent beneath the weight of endless dues. Into this world stepped the outlaw archer, whose stories were not written by kings, but sung by those who longed for justice. Some said he was a yeoman, a free-born man of the forest. Others imagined him a fallen knight, a noble stripped of title who chose the wildwood over dishonor. What mattered was not the truth of his birth, but the truth of his deeds. The ballads told of Robin's Greenwood realm, where outcasts lived like lords on the king's venison and feasted under the stars. They told of his first meeting with Little John, the mighty staff fighter who became his right hand. They told of Friar Tuck, the laughing cleric with a taste for ale and battle, and of Maid Marion, bold enough to don armor and face her beloved in combat before their love was revealed. And they told, too, of endless games of trickery and disguise, where Robin humbled sheriffs and bishops, leaving them red-faced while the poor smiled in secret triumph. Yet every story carried a shadow, for even the freest outlaw cannot escape time or betrayal. The tale of Robin's death, bleeding in a lonely priory, reminds us that even legends meet their end. Still, the arrow he loosed with his final strength pointed the way to his resting place, and so the outlaw's spirit remained fixed in the earth and in the hearts of those who believed in him. This tells his story as the old ballads once did, thematically in tales of combat, fellowship, cunning, love, and tragedy. Each episode is part of the greater myth of Robin Hood, the Prince of the Greenwood, who lived and died by the bow, but left behind a legend no sword could cut down. Sherwood stretched for mile, a living labyrinth of oak, ash, and elm, where sunlight dappled the mossy ground and the wind played endless music through the leaves. It was not just a forest, it was a kingdom with no walls, no laws, and no king but freedom itself. Here, among the tangled roots and clear brooks, Robin Hood and his companions carved out a life that belonged to them alone. In the Greenwood, time seemed different. Dawn rose with the call of birds and the rustle of deer moving softly through the undergrowth. The men would wake beneath the vaulted branches, their cloaks damp with dew, and gather around a fire kindled from fallen limbs. The air would smell of wood smoke and roasting meat, for venison was their feast, taken boldly from the king's herds. Bread and ale were shared from packs carried by sympathizers in nearby villages, for Robin's cause was never without friends. The merry men lived as though they were lords in exile. Each wore Lincoln green, dyed from the leaves and bark of the forest, so that they vanished into the trees when danger approached. At their belts hung long daggers, and on their backs rode the great English longbow, a weapon feared across battlefields and tournaments alike. Around their necks or at their sides hung bugle horns, and when one sounded, the greenwood would suddenly stir to life, with men leaping from thickets and branches, ready to gather at their leader's side. Feasts were held not in great halls, but on the grass beneath wide branches. Here they roasted venison haunches on spits, drank ale until the cups were empty, and sang songs of defiance. They laughed loud enough that the echoes traveled, daring the Sheriff of Nottingham to hear. Yet there was discipline in their mirth. Robin laid down his own code, as binding as any noble's law. No poor man was to be harmed, nor any woman wronged. Wealth, when taken, was to be shared, and those who sought their protection were to be defended as fiercely as any brother. The forest itself became part of their fellowship. Clearings served as meeting places, hollow trees as hiding holes for treasure, and caves as shelters when storms battered the canopy. Paths twisted and turned, known only to those who walked them daily, so that any sheriff's men who dared to pursue would soon find themselves lost. It was said that even the deer seemed to favor Robin, standing calm as his men approached, as though the creatures themselves understood the outlaw's kinship with the wild. To live in Sherwood was to live outside the reach of tyranny. The king's writ did not run among those trees, nor could gold or threats break the loyalty of men who had chosen freedom over fear. It was a hard life, but it was a merry one. And for Robin Hood and his band, the Greenwood was not exile, but home. One summer morning, when the trees were heavy with leaves and the streams ran bright through the forest, Robin Hood wandered along a narrow path deep in Sherwood. He carried his bow as always, but his mind was light. The forest was alive with song, and every step carried him deeper into the shade of his chosen home. It was at a narrow wooden bridge, spanning a brook that gurgled and foamed over stones, that Robin encountered a stranger. From the opposite side came a man taller and broader than any he had ever seen, a figure of immense strength whose shoulders seemed to block the sunlight. The giant carried no bow, only a long quarterstaff cut from a stout tree, and he walked with the calmness of one who feared no man. The bridge was so slim that only one could pass at a time. Robin, proud and unwilling to yield, stepped forward. The stranger, equally resolute, planted his staff and refused to move aside. They met at the middle, eyes locked, each testing the other's will. Robin's hand brushed the string of his bow, but he knew it would bring him no honor to send an arrow into an unarmed man. To fight fairly was his way, and so he cut himself a staff from a nearby branch, stripping the leaves and bark until it fit his grip. With a grin that was half challenge and half respect, he declared that they would settle the matter with equal weapons. The duel began with a thunderous crack as wood struck wood. Blow after blow rained down upon the bridge, each strike echoing through the quiet glades. Robin moved with speed and cunning, darting forward with sharp jabs, while the stranger stood rooted like an oak, every swing of his staff carrying the weight of a falling tree. Sparks of strength met sparks of skill, and neither gave ground. For long minutes they fought, until Robin's arms trembled with the strain and the sweat ran down his brow. Then the giant struck with a force that broke through Robin's guard. The blow landed squarely, and Robin tumbled from the bridge into the brook below, splashing into the icy current. The water closed around him, but as he surfaced, coughing and laughing, he felt no bitterness. He had been bested, fairly and boldly, and he admired the strength of the man who had done it. Pulling himself to shore, he rose, dripping wet, and extended his hand in peace. The stranger clasped it, his grip as firm as iron. His name, he said, was John Little, though the irony was plain in his towering frame. Robin laughed heartily and declared that such a name could not stand. Among his band, the man would be known as Little John, and so it was. Together, they returned to the camp beneath the Greenwood, where Robin's men welcomed the newcomer with feasting and merriment. Little John, once a stranger at a bridge, became Robin's most trusted companion, second only to his leader in loyalty and strength. From that day onward, the sound of staff against staff was remembered not as rivalry, but as the first chord of a friendship that would never be broken. Among the many tales of Robin Hood's adventures, one of the most memorable is the account of how he gained another of his most loyal companions, Friar Tuck. This story, passed down through old ballads and rustic songs, describes not only a contest of wit and strength, but also the forging of a friendship that would endure for years. The tale begins with Robin walking through Sherwood, his bow at his back and the Greenwood alive around him. In his wandering, he came upon a quiet river winding its way through the forest. The only crossing was a shallow ford of smooth stones, but standing at its edge was a man unlike any Robin had seen before. He was a friar, dressed in the plain robes of his order, but broad and sturdy in frame. His face was cheerful, his step firm, and in his hand he carried not only a rosary, but also a strong staff, fit more for combat than prayer. Robin, curious, observed the man with quiet interest. The friar appeared pious enough, yet his eyes shone with a lively wit, and his manner suggested a spirit more inclined to cheer than solemnity. This was no ordinary clergyman. He bore the strength of a soldier and the confidence of one who had never been easily bested. The encounter between Robin and the friar quickly became a test of endurance. The ballads tell how Robin, eager to try the friar's strength, sought to be carried across the river. But the friar, unwilling to be made a servant, demanded that Robin in turn carry him back. So it went, each man taking the other upon his back, splashing through the ford again and again, until laughter mixed with the sound of the current, and the two were dripping wet from head to toe. When at last they set one another down, their trial did not end. Staffs were raised, and the fight began in earnest. The friar proved as skilled with the oak as any man Robin had met, his blows steady and forceful, his stance unshaken by the river stones beneath his feet. The clash rang through the trees as wood struck wood, neither yielding ground easily. At length, the contest ended with no clear victor. The friar's strength matched Robin's skill, and neither could claim the other's defeat. Instead, there grew between them a mutual respect, born of trial and tested by the water's edge. It was then that Robin learned the friar's name, Tuck, and recognized in him a man of mirth, courage, and loyalty. Though his robe marked him as a servant of the church, his heart was as bold as any outlaw's, and his laughter as free as the wind through Sherwood. From that day forward, Friar Tuck joined Robin's fellowship, bringing with him not only strength in battle, but also cheer at the feast and steadfastness in hardship. Thus, the Greenwood gained another of its guardians, and the legend of Robin Hood gained one more voice in its chorus. The friar, staff in hand and jest upon his lips, would remain at Robin's side through many adventures yet to come, remembered forever as one of the merriest of the merry men. Among the many tales of Robin Hood, none is more enduring than the story of Maid Marion. Where Little John gave him strength, and a Friar Tuck gave him laughter, Marion gave him heart. She was no ordinary woman of her time, for while most ladies dwelled within the safety of manor halls, Marion was bold enough to enter the Greenwood, cloaked in secrecy, her spirit as free as the forest itself. Her origins are told in many ways. Some ballads claim she was of noble birth, raised in the company of lords and ladies, destined for marriage to a man chosen for her by courtly arrangement. Others say she was a childhood companion of Robin before he ever took to the outlaw life, and that their paths, once divided by fate, were reunited beneath the oaks of Sherwood. Whatever the truth, her tale always begins with a meeting that tested both courage and cunning. Disguised as a knight, clad in armor and armed with a sword, Marion entered Sherwood in secrecy. She moved with skill, as though trained in the arts of combat, her step silent, her eyes sharp. Robin, unaware of her true identity, confronted the stranger who dared tread so close to his domain. Seeing only an intruder, he challenged the disguised figure to prove their worth. What followed was no simple skirmish, but a contest of equals. Robin's strikes, swift and certain, met with Marion's defense, which was as deft as it was surprising. She pressed him hard, forcing him back, each clash of steel ringing through the forest night. Robin, who had faced sheriffs, soldiers, and even kingsmen, found himself matched in a way he had never expected. The fight endured, fierce and unyielding. Sparks flew as blades met, and neither gave ground. Robin's companions, hidden among the trees, watched in astonishment as their master struggled against this mysterious knight. It seemed to them that Robin himself had met his equal, and perhaps even his better. At last, when the battle reached its height, the stranger's helmet was cast aside, and the truth was revealed. Before Robin stood not a man, but a woman of striking beauty and fierce resolve. It was Marion, whose courage had led her into the Greenwood in disguise, determined to test the outlaw who had become the subject of countless tales. The recognition between them was immediate. Robin, humbled and astonished, saw not only a skilled fighter, but a kindred spirit whose courage matched his own. Marion, in turn, looked upon him not as an outlaw, but as the man she had long remembered, one who chose justice over law and freedom over comfort. Their reunion was not quiet, for laughter and exclamations followed, but it was filled with a warmth that no sword could shatter. From that day forward, Marion became more than a companion of the outlaws. She was their equal, a woman who shared their perils and their joys, who sat beside them at the fire and rode with them in times of danger. In her, the fellowship of Sherwood gained not only another hand, but a heart whose loyalty and love strengthened the band as surely as any weapon. Her presence gave Robin's story a new dimension, for it was not only a tale of defiance against lords and sheriffs, nor solely of comradeship among outlaws. It was also a tale of devotion and unity, where love was bound as tightly as loyalty, and where courage was shared by man and woman alike. Sherwood was not only a home for Robin Hood and his companions, but a stage upon which cunning and cleverness were as vital as skill with bow or sword. Among the tales of the Greenwood, none are more celebrated than those in which Robin humbled the proud and greedy, whether they were sheriffs, bishops, or merchants. His triumphs were never achieved through cruelty, but through wit, daring, and the clever application of skill. The Sheriff of Nottingham, ever relentless, sent men into the forest time and again to capture the outlaw. Mounted soldiers, clad in shining armor, advanced along the twisting paths, confident that their numbers and discipline would overcome any foe. Yet the forest had long been Robin's ally. Every tree, every winding trail, and every hidden glade had been mapped by him and his men, and each path became a trap for the unwary. Robin's ambushes were legendary. From the branches, arrows flew like streaks of lightning, striking shields and helmets with precision that left the proud soldiers bewildered. Horns sounded, summoning hidden merry men from the shadows, their faces masked by green hoods, their weapons ready for swift retribution. By day's end, those sent to capture the outlaw were scattered, defeated not by brute force alone, but by the careful orchestration of strategy and cunning. Robin's cleverness extended far beyond the battlefield. In Nottingham, he infiltrated the town itself, taking on the disguises of beggars, merchants, and even clergy. These disguises allowed him to move unseen, to gather intelligence, and to recover treasures unjustly held. Once, in the guise of a humble butcher, he sold meat at prices so low that rival tradesmen could not compete. This simple act drew attention from the sheriff, who invited the seemingly innocent merchant to dine at his hall, unaware that he had welcomed the very man he sought. Inside the hall, Robin observed the sheriff's arrogance and pride, noting every detail of the room, every guard, and every coin. When the meal ended, he revealed himself in a flourish of sudden movement and skill, leaving behind astonished guards and a humiliated sheriff. Wealth that had been amassed through oppression was reclaimed, and justice, measured by fairness rather than law, was restored. Arrows and disguises were not mere tools, but instruments of performance. Each contest in the town, or under each ruse in the forest, was executed with precision, leaving the observers, whether friend or foe, in awe of the outlaw's abilities. Robin's triumphs were never for personal gain, for gold was taken only to be redistributed, but to remind those who had grown complacent in power that cunning, courage, and the favor of the people could overturn even the most rigid authority. Through these feats, Robin Hood became more than a mere archer or bandit. He was a symbol of resistance, a figure whose laughter and skill turned fear into triumph, whose presence in both the forest and town inspired admiration and hope. Each act of cleverness, each split arrow, each disguise that allowed him to outwit the proud, reinforced the legend of a man who lived according to his own code. A code where the weak were protected, the greedy were humbled, and freedom was defended above all. The Greenwood thus became a theater of justice and mirth, where Robin Hood's mind and arrow were equally formidable. In every village that whispered his name, in every clearing where his companions gathered, the tale was clear. Authority and avarice could be challenged, cunning could prevail, and the spirit of the forest, embodied in the outlaw, could not be tamed. Among the many challenges faced by Robin Hood, none were more subtle or profound than those that brought him into the presence of kings. For while sheriffs, bishops, and abbots represented immediate threats or sources of injustice, the crown itself posed a test of loyalty, judgment, and honor. In these tales, the outlaw's cunning and courage were measured not only against men who acted unjustly, but against the embodiment of the realm's highest authority, whose power was both distant and absolute. The most famous of these stories recounts the arrival of King Richard the Lionheart, returning from the Crusades. The king, curious about the outlaw whose feats had reached even the farthest corners of the realm, traveled in disguise. Cloaked as an abbot and accompanied by a small retinue, he sought to observe Sherwood without revealing his identity. Yet the forest was alive with vigilance. and Robin's ears caught the distant sound of approaching hoofbeats, while the birds seemed to hesitate mid-song, sensing an unusual presence. Robin Hood, guided by instinct and knowledge of every path, intercepted the disguised king before he reached the heart of the Greenwood. The outlaw treated him with the same scrutiny reserved for any wealthy or suspicious traveler, yet his actions were measured and just. The king, unrecognized by Robin or his merry men, was led to a clearing where a feast was prepared. Venison roasted on spits, the aroma mingling with the scent of pine and earth, while mugs of frothing ale waited to be lifted in welcome. Robin's interactions with the king demonstrated the principles that guided him above all else: fairness, honor, and protection of the oppressed. He fed the man, offered drink, and ensured that all guests were treated equally, as was his custom. Gold or titles were meaningless in the Greenwood. What mattered was integrity, courage, and the capacity for justice. Only once the king had dined and observed the outlaw's conduct did Robin recognize the truth of the man before him. Even in the revelation, Robin's response was marked by respect and humility. He acknowledged the king as the sovereign of the land, understanding that loyalty to a just ruler was compatible with resistance against the corrupt and greedy. In turn, King Richard, far from angered, admired the outlaw's courage, cleverness, and unwavering adherence to his own code. The king's recognition of Robin's integrity solidified the outlaw's place not merely as a rebel, but as a man whose justice could coexist with the crown's authority when rightly exercised. The stories recount occasions where Robin served at court, though such service was brief. The trappings of palace life, the weight of ceremony, and the gilded confines of royal halls could not compete with the freedom of the Greenwood. The forest called him back, and Robin returned to Sherwood, where the winds through the trees were a reminder that liberty was his truest kingdom. In these encounters, the narrative emphasizes the balance between rebellion and loyalty, between justice and duty. Robin Hood was never a traitor to England, but a champion of its people, willing to challenge the corrupt while honoring the just. The king's presence in Sherwood reinforced this duality, highlighting that true allegiance required discernment, courage, and the capacity to act independently when the laws of man failed the needs of the many. Robin's legacy in these tales is therefore twofold. He remained the feared and admired outlaw of the forest, challenging the proud, defending the poor, and delivering justice with both arrow and cunning. Yet he also demonstrated that loyalty, when aligned with fairness and courage, could exist even alongside rebellion. The king's acknowledgement of Robin's deeds became a powerful symbol that righteousness, though outside conventional authority, could command respect from even the highest seat of power. The Greenwood had proven once again to be more than a refuge. It was a proving ground, a place where skill, honor, and ingenuity were measured against the full spectrum of human authority. Robin Hood, in the presence of the king, stood not merely as an outlaw, but as the embodiment of a principle older than crown or throne. That justice and freedom, once seized and defended, must never be surrendered, and that the heart of a forest-born hero beats strongest when courage and honor are one. Even the greatest legends must confront the inexorable passage of time. For Robin Hood, whose name had been sung from village to village, and whose arrows had defended the helpless and humiliated the proud, the years of freedom in Sherwood eventually brought the weight of age and illness. The once tireless archer found his strength waning. The bow that had never missed a mark in youth now required greater effort to draw. Yet his spirit remained indomitable, his laughter echoing through the trees as it always had, a sound that spoke of defiance, joy, and unbroken honor. As his body grew frail, Robin sought aid where he believed compassion could be found. He journeyed to Kirklees Priory, a secluded house of nuns, hoping for healing and care. The prioress, to whom he was related, received him, yet the sanctuary he sought proved treacherous. Instead of mercy, the care he received weakened him further. The legends speak of motives both fearful and greedy, of a hand that should have restored life instead hastened its departure. In these final moments, Robin's devotion to his principles remained unwavering. He called upon Little John, his most trusted companion, whose loyalty had never faltered through years of hunting, ambush, and battle. In his last act of independence and dignity, Robin took his bow one final time. Though his arms were weakened by illness, he set an arrow to the string and loosed it, the shaft flying true into the distance. The arrow's resting place would mark the location where Robin Hood would be laid to rest. A final testament to his life, lived in the pursuit of freedom and justice. Little John and the remaining merry men honored his wish. They carried him to the spot where his last arrow had fallen, beneath the wide expanse of sky he had loved, where the greenwood lay not far beyond. The forest bore witness to this solemn act. The protector of the poor, the champion of the oppressed, and the outlaw whose laughter had once echoed through every glade, now returned to the earth he had defended. Though his mortal life had ended, the legend of Robin Hood endured. Every arrow split, every act of generosity, every clever escape became part of the enduring ballads sung around hearths across England. The forest itself seemed to carry his spirit in the rustle of leaves and the whisper of the wind through the branches. To the poor, he remained a protector. To the proud and corrupt, a reminder that wealth and authority could be challenged with skill, courage, and cunning. Robin's life in legend is a tapestry of contrasts. He was an outlaw who protected the weak, a rebel who respected true authority, a thief who gave freely, and an archer whose laughter was as sharp as his arrows. The figures around him, Little John, Friar Tuck, Maid Marion, Sir Richard of the Laigh, were reflections of the virtues he embodied: loyalty, joy, courage, mercy, and love. Together, they transformed Sherwood into a kingdom not of stone or law, but of trust, fellowship, and the enduring human spirit. Even in death, Robin Hood was more than a man. He became an ideal, a symbol of justice, freedom, and the enduring belief that courage, laughter, and fairness can prevail over greed and tyranny. His story persists, woven into the ballads, retold in villages, and imagined anew in every generation that listens to the whispering leaves of Sherwood. The bow may be set aside, but the spirit of the outlaw, the Greenwood hero, marches eternally among the oaks and elms, a reminder that freedom, once fought for, must never be forgotten. The legend of Robin Hood endures because it is more than the tale of a single man. It is the story of a people's longing for justice when it seemed scarce, for freedom when it was denied. Beneath Sherwood's canopy, the poor found a champion who asked only for faith and goodness, while the corrupt learned that wealth and titles meant little before the arrow of truth and courage. Through centuries, his deeds remain a testament to the strength of human spirit. Robin Hood, the outlaw, the protector, the master archer, and the friend of the oppressed, lives on in every story told, in every song sung, and in every heart that believes that justice, when wielded with courage and laughter, can never truly be defeated. And so, The tale of Robin Hood continues, carried by the winds of Sherwood and the voices of those who will never forget him. If you've journeyed this far into the Greenwood with me, then you too are part of this fellowship of legend. If you wish to hear more of Robin's battles, his cunning tricks against the sheriff, and his final, fateful days, then join me again beneath the forest canopy. Subscribe to this channel so the story may find you wherever you are, and strike the bell so you never miss the next chapter. Share this tale with those who love history, myth, and the old songs of England. And together we'll keep alive the legend of the outlaw who gave hope to the poor and laughter to the oppressed.